You don't own liquidity. You borrow it. You just don't notice it when everything looks stable. Prices move slowly. Statements barely change. The numbers look calm. The balance looks available. It feels like your money is just there. But that feeling depends on a condition. You can only exit if someone else is willing to take your place at the exact moment you decide to leave. As long as a few people leave, the system absorbs it. When many people try to leave at the same time, something changes. Not with a dramatic crash, not with an alarm, with constraints. Withdrawals do not stop. They get allocated. Today, we are looking inside the mechanisms that convert your available balance into a locked queue. You can request your money back, but you won't get all of it. That doesn't mean the system is broken. It means the system is working exactly the way it was built. Private credit funds are often presented as a middle ground. Not fully liquid, not fully locked. Flexible enough to feel usable, stable enough to feel safe. And in normal conditions, that description holds. Investors submit redemption requests. Some cash comes back. The reported value of the fund barely moves. Nothing seems broken. That's why it feels so convincing. It works just often enough to feel reliable. But the structure only feels liquid because demand for exits is usually limited. That distinction matters because the assets inside these funds are not liquid assets in the ordinary sense. They are private loans, individually negotiated, rarely traded, without continuous pricing. They do not sit on an exchange with constant bids and offers. They cannot always be sold quickly without changing the price. So liquidity is not sitting inside the fund like inventory on a shelf. It has to be created when redemptions occur. And that is where the real structure begins. Most of these funds operate with redemption limits, usually something like 5% per quarter. That number sounds administrative, small, technical, easy to ignore. It is not. It is the core rule that separates the promise of access from the reality of capacity. As long as redemption requests remain below that line, the structure appears smooth. Requests clear, capital returns. The statements still look stable. No visible stress appears. But once requests move above the cap, investors are no longer interacting with a liquid product. They are interacting with a queue. And at that point, the language changes. The fund is no longer returning whatever each investor requests. It is deciding how much liquidity can be distributed across all requests, without forcing the portfolio into a visible repricing event. That is not a side effect. That is the mechanism. In a recent case, redemption requests in a large private credit vehicle reached approximately 11.2% of outstanding shares. The allowed cap was 5%, so the requests were more than double what the structure was designed to process in one window. That did not produce a liquidation. It produced a reduction. Investors did not receive everything they asked for. They received about 45%. The rest remained inside the fund. That distinction is the story. On paper, those investors still owned the remainder. In practice, they could not convert it into cash on demand. This is where many people make the wrong assumption. They assume a fund can simply meet withdrawals by selling assets. That would only be true if the assets were easy to trade, easy to price, and easy to move in size without affecting the rest of the book. Private credit is usually none of those things. These are private loans. They are often bespoke. They are often held across structures that do not produce constant market prices. Valuation depends on models, comparable transactions, internal judgments, and third-party estimates. As long as assets are not sold under pressure, reported values can remain relatively stable. But the moment a forced sale occurs, the system has to confront a price that is no longer hypothetical. a real bid, a real discount, a real mark that can spread beyond a single position. Because once one asset clears at a lower level, it does not stay isolated. It becomes information. It affects similar loans, comparable credits, other positions held by similar funds. A forced transaction can become a reference point, and a reference point can become a repricing problem. That is why the structure resists forced sales, not because selling is impossible in an absolute sense, because selling in size would expose the gap between reported value and executable value. And that gap is what the system is trying to manage. So when redemptions exceed what the fund can comfortably process, liquidity does not disappear completely. It gets redirected. This is where the secondary market matters. Investors who want out can sometimes sell their fund positions privately to another buyer, not through a public market, not at the same carrying value, and not without a discount. The discount reflects time pressure, uncertainty, and the cost of holding what someone else needs to exit. The underlying loan may not have changed at all, but the transaction price changes because the seller's need for immediacy has changed. Inside the official structure, the position may still appear stable. Outside it, a private deal may imply something weaker. So what adjusts first is not always the stated value of the asset, it is who is willing to hold it, for how long, and at what discount. Exposure shifts. Balance sheets change hands. The system moves risk around. Before it fully reprices it, it allows the structure to avoid public price discovery. Without a visible market transaction, the official mark can move slowly, sometimes very slowly, even while private transactions suggest that actual exit value is lower. This is why semi-liquid is misleading. It sounds like a description of the asset. It is really a description of the access rule. The asset is not semi-liquid in the way cash or a treasury bill is liquid. The investor is being given periodic opportunities to request liquidity from a structure that is trying to manage illiquid holdings over time. Those are not the same thing. At the center of the whole system is a mismatch. Investors are offered periodic liquidity. The underlying assets are not liquid. The bridge between those two facts is built from rules, redemption caps, timing windows, proration, queuing, secondary transfers, internal valuation frameworks. In calm periods, those rules stay in the background. During stress, those rules become the product. You stop experiencing the fund as a stable balance. You start experiencing it as a controlled allocation process. That is what the recent redemption cases reveal. Not that the structure suddenly failed, but that the structure is conditional, in a way most investors only notice when they want out. The system does not promise universal liquidity. It promises managed access to liquidity, subject to capacity. Universal liquidity means you can leave because you decided to leave. Managed access means you can leave if the structure can absorb your exit without forcing visible damage onto the rest of the book. That difference is easy to miss in good times. In bad times, it becomes the only thing that matters. And once you see it, a lot of other pieces become clearer. Why reported values can stay calm while redemptions get cut. Why secondary transactions happen at discounts. Why funds avoid selling into pressure. Why a statement can still show a number that your bank account cannot access today. None of this means every asset is worthless. None of this means every fund is the same. None of this means every redemption gate signals collapse. But it does mean the exit is not yours alone. It belongs to a system with limited throughput. When demand is low, that limit is invisible. When demand rises, that limit becomes real. And then liquidity stops feeling like a feature of ownership, it starts looking like a rationed resource. You do not own the exit, you share it. And when too many investors try to use it at the same time, the exit does not vanish. It narrows. Then it divides. The investors who received 45% already know that. The rest are learning what liquidity looks like when it is no longer assumed, but allocated.